Be creative, innovative, passionate. Be excellent, inspiring, driven. Be faithful, disciplined, prepared. At Union University, you will thrive in a Christ-centered community and be equipped for success in your life and career. Begin your journey today. At Union University, be transformed.
Students of the world, gather round. It's time for the World Student Podcast with our host, Mark and Darren.
And welcome once again to the World Student Podcast. I'm your host, Darren Sutherland, and my co-host, he is I call him the doctor, not PhD doctor, but just doctor in a good way of world student recruitment, Mark Kopinski. Mark knows folks all over the world, but today we're visiting at home. Mark, we've got some of your friends and mine on the line from places like Jackson, Tennessee, St. Louis, Missouri, Seattle, Washington, and I may have missed someone or I may have added someone I wasn't supposed to, Mark, but no doubt today's going to be a good show. What do you think?
No, it's going to be a great show. I've got my friend here, Gokhan from Rowan University in southern New Jersey. I happen to be in Philadelphia. Last time we talked, I was down in New Orleans, so I'm trying, even though my wings have been clipped here, Darren, without any international travel, I'm still trying to get around the U.S. a little bit. And I think we have pretty much the entire country covered, at least regionally, today with our guests. And we're going to talk about reopening, whatever that looks like, whether it's totally online or some kind of hybrid reopening, or for those schools that are going, totally back and opening campus up for as many of their students as possible, both international and domestic. So I think what we might do, Darren, is just have everybody introduce themselves very quickly so our listeners know who we have with us today. And then we should get into exactly what's going on in places like Tennessee and Missouri, and I can fill you in on a couple of other places I've been lately, and then we can take it from there. I know we're always against the time here, so we'll try to be as efficient as possible. Dan, did you want to lead us in by introduction and let the folks know who you are and where you're at?
Sure. My name is Dan Griffin. I currently serve as the Vice President for Enrollment Management here at Union University, located in Jackson, Tennessee. We're about an hour from Memphis and about 2 hours from Nashville. We have about 10% of our students are made up of an international population. So looking forward to the conversation today.
Hey, Dan, real quick, and I'm going to throw this out there. Is it true that all the schools in the South are deciding whether to reopen for COVID, bring students in for COVID, based on what Alabama football decides to do? Is that true?
That is not true, although at Union, we don't have football anymore. We used to. Bear Bryant actually got his coaching start right here at Union University. Fun fact. Wow.
All right, Mark, who else we got?
Well, we have Gokhan from New Jersey. I mean, we got to have New Jersey representation. So Gokhan, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, Gokhan Alkanet, originally from Turkey. I've been at Rowan for 2 years. I'm the director of the International Center at Rowan. Rowan is a national research university in Glassboro, New Jersey. We have about 20,000 students and about 250 international students.
And
good to have you, Roland.
Down south too. Sorry to talk over you, Darren. You came from down south too, didn't you, Gokhan? You were down in Auburn,
yes,
weren't you?
I worked at Auburn University's Montgomery campus for about 13 years.
So you can relate to what we were saying about football in the South, no doubt, being at Auburn.
You're either Auburn fan or Alabama.
That's it.
That's the first question you'll get if you meet someone in Alabama, yeah.
There you go. Who else we got, Mark?
Well, we've got Kathleen Davis from St. Louis University in Missouri. Kathleen, say hey.
Hey there, this is Kathleen Davis. I'm the Vice President for Enrollment and Retention Management at St. Louis University. We're one of the nation's oldest and most prestigious Catholic universities. We're a global institution in that we have campuses in both St. Louis and Madrid, Spain. We have approximately 13,000 total students with a substantial international population. Nowhere in the top 100 in the U.S. News. And so that really makes us quite attractive to the international students.
Nice.
Go Billikens.
Thanks.
And then we've got James Miller all the way out west in Seattle, Darren, your favorite place.
Yes, it is so great to be with you all today. My name is James Miller. I'm the Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Seattle University. I'm glad to see good Jesuit university representation with this group. Seattle U is a mid-sized Jesuit Catholic institution. We're located in a very urban location, right in the middle of Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood, an exciting place to study, but also an institution that is relatively well globalized, but seeking to do more. About 10% international students, and an interesting component of that population is a vast majority of those are actually transfer students coming from two-year colleges. So really interesting wrinkle for us, but just again, really glad to be here and honored to be with this amazing group of folks.
No problem. Hey, my brother lives in Graham, so I'm out in your fair city about twice a year. Beautiful part of the world to live in, no doubt.
Yeah, man.
Seattle's awesome.
Look me up next time. We'll get a beer or a cup of coffee.
Yes, sir. We'll sure do that. Hey, let's just start off, Mark. And Dan, what is going on at Union University with COVID-19 and what's going on in Jackson, Tennessee? I mean, you're in probably the most rural setting of any of our guests today. And we'll talk about the different areas and what's going on as we start, but what's going on?
Yeah, so obviously we're all living in this new world called COVID-19 where things change on a minute-to-minute basis. And so you can do all the planning you want. You can do all the tabletop exercises until you can't do any more. And then something new will come your way. And so Jackson is a rural community. We service about 400,000 folks from surrounding counties. And so our one hospital services about 8 adjoining counties here in West Tennessee. And so they are getting concerned about COVID for sure, especially as we have 5 colleges in those 9 counties that are about to kick off school. One started a week ago, moving students back onto campus. And so it's going to get real interesting real fast. The director of the Tennessee Department of Health has been very insistent that starting school is not a bad thing for us here residentially on campus, but she has emphasized the strong need to wear masks and, more importantly, to social distance. And so we're doing all the things necessary to make sure that our students stay safe when they arrive back on campus. Our students have already started to trickle back on. Many of our international students have started to move back onto campus. A lot of our student leaders have moved back on. And so it's funny, we were on a call with the Tennessee Department of Health this morning, and the question came up, what do we do with our international students who are traveling back into the country? Do we need to quarantine them? And her response to us was, frankly, I would rather have a student from Wuhan right now than a student from Nashville, Tennessee. And so obviously, Tennessee is not leading the way in reducing COVID cases. We do feel like maybe we've curved it a little bit, but it's still something that we're dealing with on a daily basis. And our students that are moving back in, we have a myriad of situations that are flying at us, and just trying to do the best to make decisions as we can.
Mark?
Yeah, well, I think it'd be interesting to hear from Gokhan and Kathleen, really a similar question, but in much bigger environments. I mean, between the two of those schools, you're talking about 30,000 students, lots of kids coming from all over the place, 3 medical schools amongst those 2 schools. And I believe St. Louis University, Kathleen, you can maybe say more because I saw this in the news last night, is at the forefront of vaccine research at your medical school. So I'd be curious to hear, what's going on in terms of campus reopening and how you're managing all of that stuff that Dan was just talking about in, big environments.
Yeah, so
maybe Kathleen first, ladies first.
Thanks, Mark. At SLU, we began moving on Tuesday of this week for our residential students all the way through this time with COVID-19. Our top priority has been the health and safety of our students, faculty, and staff. This was driven by high flexibility, to be honest. The overwhelming feedback we received from students and their families was that they wanted an on-campus experience. But we also had some that said, well, we're afraid. And so what we've done is we're operating under a hybrid model. Our students will take some classes in person and some online, but if they said that they wanted to be on campus, a majority of them will be on campus. And certainly those that are laboratory science or experiential learning related, those will all be in person. So we've had to work to de-densify our classrooms and campus. We're utilizing spaces that have not historically been classroom spaces in order to do this. On top of it, any student who said that they wanted a full slate of online classes, we made that possible for them also. As move-in began, and it would have been just last week, we gained some access to some COVID-19 tests. It had been a problem for our region of the United States in terms of access to rapid testing in particular. As this residential students move in, every student will be tested for COVID-19 at move-in. We then will look towards how do we move forward from there and look at our non-residential students. We did set up a large testing site on campus, and if students test positive prior to move-in, we have specialty housing for them until they test negative. We will provide them with dining options and other opportunities. So we've really had to pivot and become much more flexible in how and what we were doing, which had been very standard higher ed in the United States experience, which was driven heavily by the residential community. At the end of the day, keeping in mind that the students are our top priority, their health and safety is paramount, as well as that of the faculty and staff, as I said at the outset. So, I think our flexibility, our openness, our continued conversation has helped us navigate this in a different way, and in a really positive one.
Gokhan, what are you guys up to? I know you've got a lot of moving parts in central South New Jersey.
Right. We were expecting that the state would move to phase 3, which means that the universities and public schools could open and most of the programs could be offered in person. But based on the daily cases, we realized that that's not going to happen. So last week, 2 weeks ago, the university decided to start mostly online. Only the lab classes and also medical schools would be in person, but the majority of courses were going to be online. Yesterday, the governor of New Jersey signed another executive order allowing the public schools and universities open their campuses and deliver as many courses as they want in person. The university has not made a decision on this yet, but we're hoping early next week our general counsel will review the executive order and make a decision. So, this is probably the third time the university is making these changes again, if we're going to be online or in person or a combination. We have a lot of classes are now, they have a high flex technology, meaning that if we go in person, the students who don't want to come to class will be able to join those classes live from their dorm rooms or from wherever they live. For international students, our issue right now is, as most of you probably experiencing, is that the fact that the U.S. consulates are closed overseas. So most of our students admitted to fall semester could not even schedule the visa interview. So for those students, we are offering at least for the graduate students, at least 2 online courses if they want to sign up in the fall. And if they can't get a visa in January, we will guarantee 80% of their money back. This will, excuse me, this will allow students to make progress towards their degree, and also hoping that we will stay in touch with these students throughout the semester so they'll have a successful start in January, hopefully, if things get better. Other than that, at Rowan, we have reduced the number of beds in residential buildings, and also we have testing capabilities on campus, and we spared a whole residential building just for quarantine, just in case it might be needed sometime in the semester.
Wow, a lot going on. So James, you guys have had, I mean, my goodness, you were kind of in trouble early with COVID and seem to have gotten on top of it very quick. But then you've had some other issues to deal with in Seattle. Where is the university in terms of opening at this point?
Yeah, so a lot of the kind of core premises that my colleagues have already mentioned, we're adopting as well. I think that because we were very early on, and probably the first major quote unquote hotspot in the country for COVID, we have been grappling with the idea of not having students back to campus for essentially the length of the pandemic's history in the United States. And so, a couple of the things that we've done, I think, as we've considered this move is, I would echo what Kathleen said, is that as we surveyed incoming and continuing students, we saw a really strong preference for an in-person experience. I think as cases have surged nationwide, as we've seen kind of a second surge, I sense that those preferences are changing a little bit. But the reality is that what we found is, particularly our new students are choosing a place like Seattle U because they want an in-person experience. And that in-person experience, to them, it's okay if some of those classes or all of those classes are online, but having that experience of going away to college was really important to them. So we've moved forward with a reduced residential capacity and a de-densified classroom model. We basically have about half of the number of students planning to live on campus that we normally would, because of capacity. We're going to have every single student in a single room, unless we have a particular request, predominantly student athletes who are already on teams together, and situations like twins coming to college at the same time who will be living together. We've also really kind of led our decision as to whether courses need to be online or in person based upon what faculty have really told us their needs are. So the vast majority, and I would say a plurality of our classes, are going to be in online or in hybrid formats, with the exception of programs like nursing, right, that necessarily require an in-person component for simulation hospital experiences, as well as certainly those students going out into medical rotation, which is as critical as it's ever been. We're in an incredibly urban environment at Seattle U. It's a very dense environment. The majority of our faculty and staff get to campus via public transportation. And so another big consideration for us has been the health and safety of faculty and staff as they make the return to campus. And so I would say the vast majority of our faculty and staff will be working predominantly from a distance, at least through the new year, because it's not just a matter of getting in your car and getting to campus. For many of our folks, they rely upon public transportation, which we can't really control the density on. So I think we've really crafted an environment that, while technically would be hybrid, is largely online, with a residential component for particularly some of our new students coming on board. And then in particular, the focus on international students who are navigating what has to be the most complex immigration environment we've seen in the modern history of this country with respect to students studying in the United States. And doing some of the things that other colleagues have, creating a dedicated residential space for quarantine of either students coming in from the country or students who have tested positive for COVID. Really thinking about a mixture in the dining halls of certainly opportunities to make reservations for a seat at the dining hall, but also expanded grab and go options for students who will feel more comfortable eating in their residence hall room or in another space. So very complex environment and a quickly moving environment. And so, the biggest thing we're trying to do is position ourselves to be nimble and responsive, right? Because the thing that we know is that we really can't predict or put a pin in what things are going to look like. And so we're trying to really focus on, making ourselves as agile as possible in pivoting the environment to maximize, number one, academic success, and also number one, health, safety, and well-being of students, faculty, and staff.
Hey, Darren, I just would add and echo what our colleagues are saying. There's an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal this morning. It's also been picked up by a lot of education trade papers. There was a survey of students out nationally regarding going back to school, going back to their campuses, and over 60% of them have said they want to go back. So, it's not going to be easy to get them back, but I think the vast majority of them want to. And certainly in my work, most international students, probably 95%, want to be here in the U.S. and studying here. If they have to do online for a short term, they will. But the whole objective is to come to the United States and study.
No doubt. Hey, Mark, let's take a quick break and get a message from our friends at Union University. We'll be right back on the World Student Podcast with our guests from all over the United States right here.
Be creative, innovative, passionate. Be excellent, inspiring, driven. Be faithful, disciplined, prepared. At Union University, you will thrive in a Christ-centered community and be equipped for success in your life and career. Begin your journey today. At Union University, be transformed.
And thanks again for our foundational sponsor, Union University, for making the World Student Podcast available to each and every one of you. Visit Union University at uu.edu. Learn, thrive, succeed. Begin your journey today. Mark, we just heard from all these fine folks from all around the country. You know what's going on all around the world. Mark, from your vantage point, and I'll ask our panel this vantage point, once this COVID situation is taken care of, is education and how we educate going to be viewed different from now on? Or is it going to go back, everybody just returns to school just like we did before COVID ever happened? Or is this online program now going to grow exponentially?
Well, I'll be quick and brief and let everybody else comment. I think you're going to see a lot of innovation out of this experience. There definitely will be changes to how we deliver education. Certainly, online has had a place for a while, so this has just pushed it more to the forefront. And there are a lot of things you can do virtually as well, or frankly better than you can do in a traditional classroom setting. So I do think that's going to grow. But it also has reinforced the importance of education being more than taking courses. A university experience, and we were joking about college football and the SEC in the South and whatnot, but that's part of the whole passage from leaving high school into adulthood for the more traditional students, and even frankly the community as a whole. I mean, if you're in a small town environment with a big university, sports footprint, it means a lot to that entire community to be able to have these shared experiences. And, I don't think that's going away anytime soon. And I think people are really appreciating the fact that these things are available, whether it's theater or sports or music or whatever. So I think we're going to learn from this. We'll be better for it. But I do think people are going to long to get back to some of the traditions that we hold dear in the higher education system in the U.S. And I guess I'd throw it over to Gökhan because he was an international student coming from Turkey and now works, as a senior person at a university. Gökhan, what's your view on this?
I agree with you, Mark. Right now, the majority of the courses are being delivered online. They've been delivered online since March. I see that this is just a temporary solution till things go back to normal. Because from my own experience, I can say the same thing as well, but our students are the same. The students come here not for the classroom only. They come here for the American culture, education, and hopefully maybe if they could do OPT and have work experience before they return to their countries. So it's not just attending a class and taking notes. It's more than that. It's the whole experience. So I agree with you that the in-class, in-person experience is critical, and we don't know, of course, how quick we will be able to go back to that same old what we had before. But I don't see online for us to be a permanent thing. Like in certain areas, I think now we had to use online classes. It gave us opportunities that we did not consider before. Just an example is our intensive English program. Has always been an in-class program. It's a 50-year-old program and never did online. But starting March, we had to move online, and faculty had to be trained quickly. Now, actually, this past summer, we had more enrollment through the online program than what we had a year before, which was in person only. So now our program, even after I think this COVID thing ends, we will continue offering online ESL options, because we realize that there are students overseas that they don't want to come to the US, but they just want to take the courses. It's convenient for them. So I think it has advantages as well.
Dan, what's your view at that intimate Union College? I mean, you're much smaller, so the community is really super important. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I mean, distance education, goes back a long way. There's cassette tapes that are still floating around out there somewhere that students used to listen to get their distance education. And so the thought of online education isn't anything new for our industry, for sure. I think what we have learned the most in the last 6 months as we reflect on what COVID has done to our industry is a few things. One, the need to be flexible. I think we had about a 48-hour notice that we were going to be evicted off of campus in the spring. And so how do you move a large operation completely online? And I can't imagine how you do that at a place like SLU or Seattle. And so, we really had to figure out how to be flexible in our learning environment. And then how do you connect? Education is more than just being in a classroom. It's more than textbooks. How are you building that community? How are you connecting to one another? The online, the COVID world gave us a way to be innovative and to connect to students in ways that we didn't know were available to us. And then efficiency has not been something that is known to higher ed. We move very slow. Faculty committees take a long time to get decisions through and those kinds of things. And so efficiency isn't something that higher ed is known for, but COVID has forced us to be more efficient. But I think at the end of the day, what we've learned is our students want to be here. They want to be on campus. They want to be building community with one another. We only have, a small fraction of our students back right now, just our student leaders, but they're the vibrant, they're the flow of our institution. Without our students, we don't exist. And so I think there's a place for online education. There will always be a place for online education, but especially for that traditional student, they want to be here on campus connecting to one another.
Yeah. Darren, interesting enough in terms of innovation, James and I were talking about the recruitment process, especially international, but even domestic, and how you get around the world and not blow the entire university budget doing that, and all the travel that we've talked about in previous shows, and going to India and Vietnam and all these places. Well, the one thing COVID has done has evened the playing field. I mean, for schools that do very little travel now, because everything is virtual, they can talk to students and high school personnel and university personnel anywhere in the world, just like we're doing right now over Zoom, and they don't have to go anywhere. So, I mean, it's early days, but I think people are going to be learning about schools like Rowan University and Seattle and Union and St. Louis that may never have heard about any of these institutions because of the COVID pandemic. So, on the bright side of it, if this is done well this fall, and I know James and his team are working on it, they're going to visit with a lot of folks from around the world that, frankly, they would never normally be able to visit. James, I don't know if you want to say any more about that, because I know you're in recruitment planning mode right now, both domestic and internationally, and it's been pretty interesting, hasn't it?
Oh, it's fascinating, and I have to say, just even from a domestic recruitment perspective, we have so much depended upon, I think, a traditional schedule of in-person events, which will always be important, right? They will always matter, because the brand and the experience of an education like ours is best experienced in person. But the reality is, there are many students, international students, not the least of them, that are never able to access that kind of programming. So yes, it's both like kind of virtually going out to those places, but also inviting those students in. I mean, we just got done with a 2-week preview program, which would normally be our summer preview day, that we instead created a kind of dissembled, kind of a la carte, pick as you will preview program that was spread over 2 weeks. And the turnout for that has been phenomenal, both in terms of numbers, but also in terms of the origins of the people who are showing up, who just would never be able to make the flight out for an individual experience. And I think about things that we've been able to do in terms of, basic information sessions hosted by faculty about their academic programs, or even more exciting things like our science and engineering project day, allowing admitted and prospective students to come to that and see some of the amazing projects that our senior students have been able to pull off in a virtual format. These are things that getting students in person to that kind of event would be an enormous undertaking. And now, as you say, not only levels the playing field, but also kind of cuts the corner off of that edge, right? That you really are able to just get directly from point A to point B, rather than having to go down the hallway and around the corner. And so I think it's super exciting. And what I hope is that we don't have an immediate regression to the kind of in-person dominated world that we've lived in. That yes, in-person recruitment is always going to be vital, and particularly around the world where relationships in person matter so much. But and the big but there is, we have an opportunity to really think about how we bring virtual into our recruitment efforts moving forward, which again, yes, is great for our institutions, but is also really great for the students, right? That they get that exposure, they get that time with us, they get to see us in a way they would never be able to see us, particularly if they needed to fly 8,000 miles to get to Seattle. So I agree, Mark, it's a really exciting time, despite everything that is seemingly coming unglued in front of us.
Yeah, it's really something. And I mean, Kathleen, we haven't had a chance to really talk too much about this, but St. Louis University's medical school has been all over the news. They're very deep in trials for, I guess it's a vaccine. I think you're in stage 3 of trials or something.
We are. We're seeking volunteers. We've hit stage 3 of process of testing for the pharmaceutical company Moderna's vaccine against COVID-19. It's a partnership that we're doing because it's easier to find volunteers for this kind of thing when you're partnered up with places like Washington University. So SLU and WashU went public yesterday seeking volunteers. They're wanting hundreds of adults to participate, in large part because we want to ensure that we're able to tamp down the pandemic. The hope from the Vaccine Center, where Sharon Fry is our clinical director, she's really hoping that the community shows up in full force and works to find a solution to the pandemic. And vaccination is really the best solution at this juncture to prevent disease. So that's really exciting to us. And yeah, Mark, it was in yesterday's paper. So
yeah, it is all over the internet this morning. It's funny. I had a young man that Darren and I have talked to in the past. He's an international student currently in the U.S., and he was asking if he could be part of the trial of whether you guys were paying or not. And I said, well, I'll be talking to the VP this morning. I'll ask her. I think he's a little short on cash, so he's ready to sign up.
Yeah, I'm sure. I don't know the details on whether we pay or not. There is risk involved. And I didn't see when I saw the call out, it was more volunteer focused on 18-year-olds and older, especially those working in hospitality, tourism, public health, educators, and then students. So that young man may fall into the category, but he'll have to reach out to them. He can visit vaccine.slu.edu for further details.
Yeah, well, I'll let them know. Gokhan, I'm curious, we talk a lot on this show about students coming into the United States and what their experiences are. What is going on with American and other students from around the world that want to leave Rowan for a semester and study abroad? Are they able to do any of that this semester at all, or has that all been put on hold at the moment?
No, we had to cancel all our study abroad programs. We actually canceled them mid-July with the having a conversation with the provost, general counsel, and the deans as well, that we thought it would be high risk for students to travel to, because we have programs in almost every country, about 200 programs overseas. And some students go for 2 weeks, some students go for the whole semester. And we, knowing how difficult it could get if the COVID cases go up in that certain country, it's difficult sometimes to get the student back to the US, because we had to go through that in March. To bring all the students back within 2 weeks was a lot of work and risk as well on behalf of the students, because we had some students, they were stuck in Europe. They go from one country to the next country, and that country now is on the travel restriction list, and the student has to go to a third country anyway. So not to go through all those and put the students at risk, we canceled them. We are still thinking about spring 2021 study abroad programs. We haven't canceled those yet. We will probably make a decision around October, and then we just need to see a little bit more how this is going. At the end of the day, Mark, what matters is there a vaccine and is there a treatment for this? If we don't have these two things, I don't feel, and I believe the general counsel will feel the same. We will think the same way, that I don't feel like we should send students overseas, not giving them enough precaution.
Boy, Darren, I feel badly about a lot of the things that have happened, but I have, a lot of disappointment for these seniors, students that are traditional fourth-year students at universities, and all that they're going to miss, because you really can't replay this. So whether it's study abroad, or you're at Penn State or Alabama or Michigan and you like to go to a college football game in the fall, or a concert or whatever it is, I mean, it's a one shot to be able to do this your last year, and it pretty much looks like most of that stuff is gone. And I feel really bad for those kids, because they'll never experience that.
No doubt, Mark, and also that segues into my next question that I'll start with Dan over at Union about, and it's about high school seniors. Dan, with the difference in high school education this year, some are at home, some are online only, some are both. Are you in your administrations worried that these students will not be ready for the college experience in 2021? And if so, or if not, what would you tell parents all across the world, all across the country, domestically, to do to have your child prepared?
I don't think that we're concerned about college preparedness. I'm not sure that one year, their senior year, is all that vital to the success, as long as that student, has been diligent in preparing their entire life. I think high schools will be able to help them complete their senior year. When you talk about recruiting that high school senior, this is definitely a different age that we're living in. I don't want to speak for everyone on the call, but the way we acquire names, the way we acquire leads is definitely going to look a lot different in the near future without standardized testing. There's a lot of schools that are getting away from standardized tests, ACT, those types of things. And so, we're going to have to make some internal institutional decisions. We have begun that process with our faculty. Union's average ACT is above 26, and so our faculty don't want to waive the ACT requirement for sure. And so that's something that we've held on to for a long time. But in this day and age of COVID, if a student can't take a standardized test, what happens? And so for those parents and students out there that are listening, just be diligent in your senior year of studies. Continue to do those standardized prep tests if you can. And colleges are just going to, we talk all the time about creativity, and creativity is going to win. And whoever's the most creative in trying to get in front of those high school seniors is going to win. I feel really bad for those athletes, with the NCAA postponing their at least Division II and Division III championships, canceling their fall championships. There are a lot of questions around the recruiting of athletes for next year, for sure. If everybody's given another year of eligibility, what does that mean for high school seniors? I think we started off this call by saying in a COVID world, things change on a minute-to-minute basis. And so who really knows what the fall 2021 class is going to look like? But I do know that students need to continue to do what they're supposed to be doing inside the classroom, and just don't assume that standardized tests are going away altogether. There's plenty of ways to prepare for those tests online. And so I would encourage all of those students to continue to do those things.
Mark?
I think Dan raises a really good point, and our viewership is probably not so aware of this. The standardized tests issue, and I know Kathleen, and she might want to comment on this because they're also talking about doing long-term test optional and doing away with SAT and ACT as well. But, for the university recruiters, Darren, and you've been involved in this over the years with advertising, they're able to buy these student names and information so they can reach out and talk about their institution with them. And if students are not taking the exam because it's no longer necessary, then access to that information is gone. And this is incredibly important internationally, because a lot of the lead generation that happens in places like India and China and South Korea and all the places we've been talking about is international students taking the SAT, College Board making that information available to schools like, Rowan University, and then Rowan University reaching out and introducing their institution to a student in Thailand, where, that student may have never heard of Rowan and now has and ends up enrolling. And that whole process is definitely changing. So Kathleen, maybe you'd like to talk a little bit about the process you guys are going through in this area, because I know it's controversial in St. Louis.
It is. So for us, our ACT has averaged historically around a 29. As I said at the outset, we're in the top 100, and so those two have correlated historically. The institution itself very much we see our students and our faculty as top tier. That is who and what we are. And so as COVID-19 hit, it just so happened that we had in the few months prior been undergoing a process to begin to embrace the thought of test optional. When COVID-19 hit, the faculty were seeing the availability of tests go down, and they said, well, Kathleen, I think we're going to get on board with what you've been proposing, which was really helpful in that we were able to implement what is a 3-year pilot with continuous assessment of it to be in a test optional space, to begin working with students more broadly, and to not limit ourselves just to the score, but to look at what we've been doing right along, which is a holistic admissions approach in the absence of that score. We're now working as a community to educate one another on how you evaluate for admissions in a holistic way without an exam. But folks are really starting to embrace it, and there's a lot of energy behind it. That's in large part because for SLU, we have a key component of social justice in our mission. And we know that there is correlation there with access. And so we've done a great deal of work in this space and are really excited. And it just so happened that it was at the time in which we needed it most in this instance.
So Kathleen, how do you make up for the loss of all those potential leads that you would normally acquire either, by students sending you their score or you by, purchasing their data information? What do you do?
I think that's something I think that folks nationally in higher ed are struggling with. We are also, right, but we're looking at alternative sources of where we can find students. We're advertising in a digital space more broadly. We've increased the number of events out there. We've increased our IP and digital targeting in large part because we're not able to purchase names in a way that we would have historically. We're looking at alternative places to buy them, but it's really challenging.
Yeah, I bet. GoCon, what are you guys doing?
As you said, Mark, the number of test takers probably, I've been looking at the TOEFL name by, there's so few test takers from March to August 2020. And like many other universities, we also accept now Duolingo online tests in place of TOEFL, and Duolingo does not, as far as I know, they don't allow us to have access to the test taker information like TOEFL or GRE does. Right. So that's a challenge itself. And because this name by thing is going to be difficult as there are not many test takers last 6 months or so. We've been working with our agents. That's one of the things. They provide us some leads. And also we will be attending so many virtual fairs in August, September, and October, and the fair organizer will share the attendees the information with us. So that's going to give us a good number of contact information of prospective students. That's kind of it's not the same thing. We know it's not the same thing as SAT, ACT names, but it's a temporary solution at this point.
Yeah, it sounds like a big challenge ahead. James, I'm curious. I spent a lot of time talking to education companies. We sometimes call them education agents or education counselors or what have you. And we've had several of them on different podcasts that Darren and I have done. And, many of them are reporting to me they're really hurting as a business. I mean, they rely on student enrollments and making some fees from the university, but with very few students coming this fall and the prospects for early 2021, at best are going to be difficult. I'm curious what you're hearing from some of your partners out there and how they're going to get by and also help Seattle as we try to get back to, a more normal flow of students.
Yeah, I think in some way, shape, or form, everybody in our sector, whether they are on the sending side or the receiving side, is coping with how they are going to deal with this massive disruption in business model. And I think as I talk to our educational partners, the thing that is really exciting is that, we have an opportunity to look at, why couldn't a student from China enroll in some courses online at Seattle U and essentially study under a foreign national status instead of an F1 status? And so I think thinking about some things creatively on that front has been interesting. And I think it's also been an opportunity, as you know, Mark, for us to retrench and think about university to university partnerships abroad, right? This is a good time to be thinking about 2+2s, and not so much the faculty to faculty relationships that we oftentimes in higher education are most focused on, right? Kind of higher education development and development of curriculum, but rather really thinking about how do we create creative pathways for students to make it to the U.S. in the same way that we think about transferring for students here in the country, right, for U.S. citizens. And so why can't we set up a creative 1+3 or a creative 2+2? Because we know at some point, as Gokhan has pointed out, that students do want access to all the awesome opportunities that exist in the U.S. higher education experience. And so there will be students ready to make that leap when things start to reopen. And so it's really just a question of how do we position ourselves. And I think that that's not just a short-term thing, but I think that if those who are thinking about those university to university partnerships or thinking about creative pathways to get students will only benefit from an enrollment perspective in future years when things are wide open. But now we've opened up these new pathways and these new ways of thinking about studying in the United States.
Mark, no doubt as we proceed, if I could pick one word that we're all looking for, that I'm hearing from each of our panel today, it's normal. And hopefully soon we can deliver that word and we can all feel normal again, but chances are it's changing forever. And the new normal is what it is, and we'll learn as we go. Mark, what do you think?
Well, I think so. I mean, it's a bit like a roller coaster ride. We just got to hang on and hope it ends soon. I'm not a big roller coaster fan, as you could probably tell. If you like that sort of thing, you're probably having a great time. But I think we have a show coming up next week or the week after with international and domestic students joining us and talking about, their experience this fall, whether it's online or hybrid or they're back, on their campus. So I'll be really fascinated to hear what students have to say. And we probably should have a parent show too, Darren. I know you and I are parents, and, a bunch of I guess all of our guests are parents too. We should probably have a parent-focused show. I think our listeners would really enjoy their perspective.
Yep. I want to thank all our guests today. We could sit and we could do this for hours, but unfortunately we don't have hours, and we know you don't have hours, but thank you for taking time out of your busy day. James, thanks for being with us out there in Seattle, my friend.
You bet. It was a real pleasure.
Miss Kathleen, it was a pleasure to talk to you today, ma'am, and thank you for being with us from the Billikens at St. Louis University.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Up in New Jersey, our new friend who's an ex-Auburn guy. I'm a Bulldog, so I can't really be nice to you, but I can extend a hand of friendship. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having us. War Eagle.
There we go. And as always, we want to thank Dan Griffith and our underwriting sponsor, Union University, uu.edu in Jackson, Tennessee. Dan, thank you for being a part of this show today.
Glad to be here and glad you support the Union Bulldogs, Darren.
There we go. There we go. Mark, we'll talk to you next week. Once again, tell your friends, tell your family, share this podcast on social media. Leave a comment in the comment section or in a remark, if you would, please. And for more information about student recruitment, you can always reach Mark. Mark, you want to give them your information?
Well, gsra.org.uk is where they can find me. So that's probably the easiest way, and we'll be on air next week.
Talk to you soon. Again, panel, thank you so much for your time. Y'all have an incredible day. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the World Student Podcast. For more information on how you can be a part of this podcast and information on international student recruitment, email us at worldstudentpodcast@gmail.com. And please leave a remark in the remarks section. This podcast was a production of BG Podcast Network. Jonathan Giles, producer. Jacob Sutherland, director.
Be creative, innovative, passionate. Be excellent, inspiring, driven. Be faithful, disciplined, prepared. At Union University, you will thrive in a Christ-centered community and be equipped for success in your life and career. Begin your journey today. At Union University, be transformed.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month, based on what you can afford to pay. 800-292-6156. 800-292-6156. 800-292-6156. 800-292-6156.